So good evening, welcome. I'm John. I'm the event director at Literati Bookstore. We're pleased to welcome Eliza Nellums and special guests in support of the paperback release of All That's Bright and Gone. First, a quick overview of our webinars. If you didn't hear me as you joined, the chat is closed, but you might want to keep the chat window open during the event, as I will be dropping links to purchase All That's Bright and Gone from Literati Bookstore. And there is a link in the description below on YouTube if you're watching later there. I will make a quick note about the store. Our in-store operations are currently closed at the moment. We're working to return our curbside service and our service where we ship books directly from our store's inventory to you or anywhere in the United States soon. But in the meantime, we are shipping books direct to your home anywhere in the United States via our distributor. So if you're watching this now, that's how your book will likely arrive to you, although it won't ship until next week when it is released. But if you wanted to have your book curbside, if you're a Southeast Michigan customer, just sit tight. We'll probably have updates soon next week when we resume our curbside. We're hoping to do that as quickly as possible. But if you can't wait for the book, and I don't blame you, you can still order it online, and we will ship it when it's released via our distributors. Wonderful direct-to-home service, and it will still support the Literati Bookstore. And a reminder, you can also shop for more books at literatibookstore.com as well. And in lieu of a book purchase, we'd also ask that you consider a $5 donation to sustain our virtual programming, whether you'd like to think of that as the subscription for the month of January or for all the events that will be virtual for most of 2021. You can make donations at literatibookstore.com/donation. Otherwise, we simply thank you for your attendance this evening, very late this evening in the case of one of our guests, this morning, depending on where and when in the world you may be joining us from. So without further ado, I'll introduce tonight's featured author to introduce our special guests as well. Eliza Nellums is a member of the Metro Writers and has a master's degree from the University of Michigan, raised in the Detroit suburbs. She now lives with her cat in Washington, D.C., where she's a manager of a grants program. Her short story, Changelings, was published in the anthology Magical. All That's Bright and Gone is her debut novel and was featured in the Washington Post and Real Simple magazine. They can't hear you necessarily, but they can sense it through the power of the internet. Please join me in welcoming all of our guests to your living rooms.
Well, thank you, John. We really appreciate you having us at this hour. And everybody, yes, please do buy a book. If not this book, then some other book from Literati Bookstore, because they're such a great part of the community and they've been so kind to host us. I am super excited to have two such exciting special guests with me today. I have the real Aoife Scott, as I've been advertising her. And I've gotten so many comments from people being like, what do you mean the real Aoife Scott is coming to your book launch party? Because for those who don't know, Aoife Scott is the protagonist of my book. At least I thought she was. And then it turns out that she's a real person. And she's a wonderful musician, and I had to have her come. So I asked her, and I'm so grateful that she was able to come. She is absolutely tearing up the charts. She was Best Folk Art at the Irish Post Music Awards and the Emerging Artist of the Year at the Live Ireland Awards. And her most recent song won Single of the Year at the Celtic Music Awards. Might be Celtic over there, I'm not sure. She has a Christmas album. She has a new CD. She knocked Ed Sheeran off his top spot recently. So, like, pretty famous person to come to my strange paperback book launch. And I also have Jesse Vilinksy, who is the famed audiobook recorder of the audiobook featured here. When I was thinking of who I wanted to have at this event, who I hadn't talked to, who I hadn't reached out to, I was thinking there's only one other person who knows Aoife, not that Aoife, the book Aoife, as well as I do, and that's got to be Jessie, because she spent all that time with the character. Other than perhaps the editor of the book, I think Jessie must be the #1 expert on all things Aoife, and she has an illustrious career. She's a professional voice artist. I was super fascinated to learn more about her, so I messaged her on Instagram, as the kids do these days, and just invited her. So we'll start with Aoife, and then we'll go to Jesse next. But Aoife, it is midnight for you. That's correct?
It is midnight, and no, you're okay, love, for a second. It is midnight. It's late, but it's okay. We're so excited to be here. We're really excited to be virtually in Michigan, because Michigan is our second home in America. You won't believe that. We absolutely adore it. We've played in Ann Arbor, in Conor O'Neill's Irish Bar, and we played in another event center there, and so it's amazing to be invited. I'm delighted to be here. I can't believe I'm meeting you for the first time, Eliza. It's pretty cool.
Except for Twitter, where we're very tight. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. So my name is Aoife Scott, and that's what's funny is I can't believe that I'm now talking to the author of the book who made my name famous in the Washington Post, which is pretty cool.
For people who haven't heard this story, I picked Aoife as a difficult name that Americans probably wouldn't know, and was actually Aoife O'Donovan, who's another singer, strangely enough, was the place I first heard that name and was like, oh, I love this name. I wanted to know how to pronounce it, and it just sort of sunk in, and it became part of the book later. A major theme of the book is that adults cannot say the name correctly, and the only person who says it right is her mother. And so like the name is really important to the book. It's not like just any character name, it's a central theme. And so then I'm on Twitter and I get a message from someone being like, did you possibly write a book about me?
It's very strange to actually even hear when Jesse who's reading the book, you know what I mean, and hearing all these people trying to pronounce Aoife Scott, which is my name, and that's so surreal because I get that like on a daily basis, generally all over the world if it's not in Ireland. Now you have everybody who wants to know about the name Aoife, it is one of the most common names in Ireland. There was 5 other Aoifes in my class in school, and so it's just such a common name. It's actually ridiculous how common it is. So, but there's not that many. Well, there actually is. There's one other Aoife Scott that I know in Ireland as well, but it's very rare.
I meet this person. I must meet them immediately.
I know, yeah, I'll try and get them for you. I know they live in Dublin somewhere. But yes, it's pretty cool to be talking to you because I mean, Aoife Scott, Aoife is definitely one of the most difficult names, and I'm sure Aoife O'Donovan has a problem with people pronouncing her name. But I'm delighted that Aoife O'Donovan, the singer, has also blazed the way, and now Aoife Scott from All Is Bright and Gone is blazing the way for people to be able to pronounce my name correctly. It's amazing.
Well, and it's one of those things, once you hear it one place, you start noticing it more and more other places. A friend of mine just named his daughter Aoife, and I was
Really?
like, of all the names, how did you pick Aoife? I've never heard it until I started this project. And I think he was also inspired by Aoife O'Donovan. So she really is a groundbreaker here, but the next generation will be inspired by Aoife Scott, the singer. That's still, that's the number one question I get when I do book clubs or any other event. That's like that's the first question. Why did you name this girl Aoife? No one can pronounce it. What is that? For people who don't know anything about the book, I should have said to start with, it's spelled Aoife. So it does not look on the page phonetically the way it is pronounced, Aoife. So in America, we just can't really handle that. But I'm glad to hear you say that in Ireland, it's really not a burden of a name for you at all.
No, it's not. And it's when I was growing up, it was so common that I wished I had another name, which was, the usual childhood thing where you'd be like, oh, it'd be so nice to have such a nice name. I'd love Rebecca or something, like fancy.
Jesse's a nice name.
Jesse's a beautiful name. So for me, so it's been an interesting thing growing up in Ireland. And then when I started kind of a music career and I started traveling to America, and then people tried to say my name and they're like, so what I do as well is I say it's like Eva with an F, which is hilarious. That the doctor at the start of the chapter starts calling her Eva. And I just think that was just like crazy for me, So I just answer to Aoife, or I answer to Aoife or Effie or Waffy or any kind of name. My usual joke is I'll answer to anything with an F in it. I'll turn around, but not the bad words. So I try and do my best in that sense. But yeah, so it's amazing. I mean, how I found out about you was that I have a Google alert set up for any, news reports in case I get reviewed in my music, So it was like, next thing you know, I just saw the Washington Post. I was like, oh my God, I've made it. I was like, what
And
is
that
this?
article got syndicated everywhere. They know you in Guam. They know you in Puerto Rico. They know you.
It's amazing. But you must have felt so happy to have been, such a feature in the Washington Post. Amazing.
That was amazing. I don't really even know how that happened. I think I have to thank my publicist for that. And I was in a meeting when I saw my own Google alert go off, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And like literally, I couldn't keep it together for the rest of the meeting. I have a coworker. I don't think he's joined us today, but he was in the meeting with me, and he was like, "Yes, you turned entirely purple, and you stopped breathing, and you squeaked." And I was like, "Yes, I squeaked. I squeaked a lot." But it's even better now because it brought us together.
Yeah,
And
it's pretty cool.
get to listen to your music. I've been joking all week that the fact that you're a real person, like I keep saying, oh, Aoife is going to join us at the party and she's going to sing a song for us. And like, that is surreal to me because,
Yeah, Aoife's 6. Yeah.
She's a 6-year-old who I invented. So it's, perhaps not as amusing to anyone else as it is to me.
I wonder, do people think you're actually going crazy when you're actually saying that to people?
I've been making adaptation jokes all week long. Like my characters have come to life and come to confront me. And
Aoife is your Teddy.
Right. Yes. So you very kindly offered to sing a song for us.
If you don't mind,
extremely excited. We don't just mind. We're thrilled.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I grew up in a musical family, and so for me, having a chat without singing a song is very strange. We sing, and we all like the whole family business is singing, and so when you asked us, I'm like, of course I'm going to sing because that's what I do, So it's nearly like speaking. It's the same thing. So I'm going to ask Andy, who's my partner, to come in and join us. We're going to sing our latest song that we wrote in lockdown. Is Andy? And Andy reckons that he's been to Literati bookstore before in the past when his rambles. So yeah, it's pretty cool to be here in the Literati bookshop virtually.
We're trying to make sure they sell your CD. We want it on the shelves. That's the long game here. I'm thrilled that you'll have new fans.
I think the long game here, Eliza, is that they'll buy the book is the main thing, which comes out next week. I think.
All right, I'm going to mute myself so that your sound quality is as perfect as it can be.
Okay, cool. We're going to sing a song that we wrote in lockdown about hope and getting through the bad times, because back in April, or even March, we were in America when all of this happened, the pandemic. We had to fly home very suddenly, and we came home and we were kind of dealing with the reality of our jobs being taken away from us, which are still not there, but we've kind of accepted it a little bit more now, where we're kind of enjoying being in pajamas all day, which is very nice. So we are really feeling hopeful for the future, and with some good news happening and things happening all over the world, we're really hopeful. So we wrote this song about how the seasons change in October, in the fall, and how it's a time for refresh, renew, and we all kind of go into our own little safe places, and we come back out in the spring when it's all going to be amazing. So I hope you like it. It's called Sweet October. Why sparrows wing told they feed the soul. Stop a while where the water meets the stone. Take a breath, you can almost taste the sea. It's a half-hour drive down towards Kilkee. And come, sweet October, all this will come together. All the things you'll ever hope for, sunsets in sweet October sky. Yesterday, oh, I thought I read your mind. Of Amsterdam and to the Alpine skies. All those times you think deserve a smile will come again if you give a little time. And come, sweet October, all this will come together. All the things you'll ever hope for, sunsets in sweet October sky. brilliant. Thank you
Oh
very
my
much.
gosh.
Thanks
I'm
for
sure
letting
everybody
us.
is breaking out in crazy applause here. We can't hear them, but they're loving it. That was
Thanks
wonderful.
very much. Thanks for facilitating our song there. We really wanted to sing, so thank you very much.
I'm thrilled. It's making my night. I'm sure it's making everybody's night. Jesse's thrilled. We're just so excited.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Thanks, Jessie. Thanks very much. Thanks, brilliant.
Aoife O'Donovan herself could not have done any better. She
Oh,
was
well, I
invited.
wouldn't.
She did not respond. I don't know
she's
her on
lovely.
Twitter as good, so she doesn't take my DMs. But
I met her once when I was 12. You wouldn't believe that. Ireland is so small, it's ridiculous. Like, so it's mental how crazy it is. But yes, she's
we've
amazing.
got the
I know her.
best Aoife here.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks very much. Thanks a million.
Thank
Well,
you.
I let you go,
Yes.
and we will go to bed.
Yes, this is very late for you. Thank you so much, and thank you for the guitar. Was it Charlie?
No, his name's Andy.
Andy,
Andy, yeah, sorry.
thank you so much.
Andy.
You're wonderful. Thank you.
Look at the book.
Thanks, guys. See you later. Thanks a million.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow, Jesse, we better have a really great conversation about audiobook recording.
I will do my best. That is definitely a very beautiful and tough act to follow.
You know, I think now that Aoife in the book definitely must become a singer, don't you think? Like, there's not really a lot of music in the book, but I think that she's going to discover a passion for music in later life and look just like Aoife and basically just become Aoife.
She has quite the imagination for it, and her need to discover, I think, is inherent in any art. So I think it would make sense for her to become a musician.
To become the real Aoife and move to Ireland.
Perfect.
Well, you also have a talent to share with us today. You are a fabulous voice artist. I get so many compliments on the audiobook. And, you know, when I think it was my dad first heard that we were doing an audiobook, he was like, what 6-year-old are they going to get to do this recording? Because that's going to have to be a very talented 6-year-old to read this whole thing. Like, I don't know how that's going to work. And I was like, I don't think they're going to get a real child, you know, but who knows? Maybe they will, you know, I didn't know either. And when they sent me the recordings and I got to hear you, I was like, perfect, because I don't think a 6-year-old could have done it, but like you did a wonderful job. And everybody says that they love the narrator. They think it must have been so difficult for you. And you agreed kindly to take more weight off my shoulders at this event and do a short reading for the audience of the book.
Yeah.
So I will mute myself again.
All right. So I'm just going to do a little bit from the beginning here. I know my brother is dead. I'm not dumb like Hazel Merkowitz from up the street says. Sometimes Mama just gets confused is all. Like every year on the feast day of St. Theodore, his birthday, Mama sits out an extra plate for Theo, with a candle on it instead of food, because I guess Theo isn't hungry. And Mama says, "Isn't this nice? It's like we're all together again." I guess it's nice. Alfie? Aoife Scott? That man with the clipboard probably means me. I stand up. "Come on, Teddy," I whisper. I cover my mouth with my hand because Mama always tells me not to talk to Teddy out loud where strangers can hear me. Teddy gets up when I do, walking on all fours behind me, with his big head hanging down. We go over to the clipboard man, who is wearing pale blue pajamas. And I say, "Here I am." "Is it Alfie, sweetheart? Did I get that right?" "It's Aoife," I say. Aoife. I have to say it a lot. Grown-ups never get it right. "Oh, okay. Eva. Why don't you come along with me and we'll go see the doc, okay?" Teddy growls, but I pretend not to hear him. "Okay," I say. We walk together down a white hallway that smells like bleach. "That's a real interesting name you've got," says the clipboard man. "The spelling of it, I mean." "My mama's name is Siobhan," I say. "It's spelled S-I-O-B-A, I mean B-H A-N. Wow. I guess you all must be Irish, huh? No, I say politely. We're from Chicago. The man stops at a white wooden door and knocks. Come in, says someone from inside. Dr. Perlman, this is Aoife Scott, he says, putting a hand on my shoulder and guiding me in. She's the little girl who was brought in from Westgate Mall? Oh yes, Eva. Hello, says Dr. Perlman. She's a gray-haired lady with a big necklace of yellow glass. There's yellow beads hanging from her ears, too. Teddy doesn't like her. It's with an F, I say quietly. Aoife? She looks down on her file. What an unusual name, she says. I've never seen it before. It's after my grandmother, I say, because that's what Mama always says. And my middle name is Joan because my birthday is on her special day. I like that Joan is my saint, because she was brave. Mama says Joan was a warrior, and Aoife is a warrior's name too, back in the old country. How lovely. Dr. Perlman doesn't know it, but Teddy is biting her shoe. He's going to pull it right off her foot if she's not careful. How old are you, Aoife? 6. That's great, she says. I'm not really sure why it's great, but I nod anyway. Well, come on inside. Why don't we sit down over here? She was sitting behind a desk, but she gets up to walk over to another table and chairs that are my size, like they have at school. She sits in one of the chairs. I think it's going to topple over, but she's good at balancing on it. And I pull out the other one. Teddy tries to sit in the third chair, but he's fat, and he kind of splodges over the side. I think I have some Play-Doh here, she says. Would you like that? I nod. Mama doesn't like me to play with Play-Doh because it makes a mess, but Dr. Perlman doesn't have to know that. She hands me a carton with a blue lid. My favorite color is red, but I can be a big girl, so I don't complain. I peel back the lid and stick my nose in because I like how it smells like melted crayons. Then I dump it out on the table and start to make snakes. I always start by making snakes. Would you like to play too? I ask. Because Mama says you should be polite, even when there's not enough clay in one carton for 2 people to make a lot of snakes. Miss Dr. Perlman picks off a little corner. I guess that's okay. She pinches it between her fingers and makes it into a little frisbee. So, Aoife, can you tell me about what happened this morning? She asks. She says my name pretty close to right. I can hear the F. Still, Teddy shakes his head no. He doesn't want me to say. I don't know, I say. Dr. Perlman sighs. She looks down at my hands. I look down at my hands and flatten one of the snakes. Tell me about your mommy, she says. I don't call her mommy. I call her Mama. Her name's Siobhan, I say. She's trying to teach me cartwheels, but I can't do them yet. My mommy and I used to turn cartwheels too, says Dr. Perlman, smiling. I try to think of how to describe Mama. If she was an animal, she'd be a horse, because she's pretty and nice and has long hair. If I could pick any animal, I'd be a bear for sure, as big as a house. But if I had to be the animal that is most like me, I'd probably be maybe a squirrel or a chipmunk. But I'd rather be a bear.
now I'm wishing I'd made you go first, because I think this really explains why I'm so obsessed with the fact that the other lady's name is Aoife Scott. So I'm realizing, probably most of the audience is my own friends anyway, and your friends, maybe they already know, but I should have set you up first, because that scene does have like her name in it a billion times, as does the entire book have her name in it.
Yes.
So as you were reading, I was just thinking I made your job as hard as I could have possibly made as a writer. I think in future work, I will think more about the audio reader and how the like vocal tags tie into who's speaking. And there's so many places when I was reading back over it that I was like, this is very difficult for you to have to do the voice and make sure that the audience understands when Aoife's thinking versus when she's actually speaking out loud. Because on the page, of course, you can see the quotation marks and it's obvious whether or not she actually said that. But so much of the time, she has her own little aside that is a mental thought. And you have to somehow communicate that to the listener without any like verbal cue. Like, is this an unusually challenging book for you, or does every book have its own challenge and every project has a different, quirk?
Every project has its own quirk, or its own style. I would say not having the speaker tags is not necessarily a big challenge when it comes to doing an audiobook. The thing that I found most challenging about this book is that while I do have the ability to do the voice of a 6-year-old.
Yeah, you do a wonderful 6-year-old.
Thank you. To do the voice of a 6-year-old for an entire audiobook was a bit more asking more physically from me than I had done prior. So there were definitely days that we call vocal rest in between. But not having the speaker tags, I think it's my job as the narrator to make sure that I am ideally conveying it to the listener, that this is something that she's internalizing, or this is when she's speaking. And so generally, we'll take an extra pause before the character is speaking, or I am the type of narrator who I generally like to do different distinct voices for each character. So ideally, you're going to know who's speaking that way. I've seen that there are some listeners who actually generally don't like it if there's a lot of he said, she said, character names said, things like if it happens every sentence, because it can take them out of it sometimes. But then there are other times where you need it. Because I've done other books where they've chosen not to do a lot of speaker tags. And I, as the narrator, I'm like, there were 4 people in this scene speaking, and I'm not sure who's speaking now.
Do you ever ask the author or anything, or do you just make your best guess and figure?
Generally, I'll make my best guess. Usually I can figure it out for the most part. And usually it's sort of seems to be a print style as well, of like, okay, Jeremy said in this line, and then Aoife spoke, and then the next line will more than likely be Jeremy if we've decided to put new quotation marks around that.
Yeah,
so right. You sort of become... But
not if there's 4 people.
Yeah, if there's 4 people and we haven't denoted anybody, then it's sort of I'm just going to use my imagination and create this scene, and hopefully I've gotten it right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I had a few questions I wanted to ask, and I get the privilege of going first, but then we're going to open it up to the audience. I saw John put a note that if people have questions, they can write them into the question chat, and John will read them at the end because everybody's muted and we can't look at the chat while we're talking. But I want to ask first, sort of, how did you get into voice acting work? Like, was this something you knew about? Did you start in physical acting? Just a little bit about the background. It's fascinating.
Sure. So I went to college for theater, and I had always had the idea that I would do on-camera acting. And then when I got out of college, I started out at the Second City Improv Theater, and through doing a lot of their classes and performing there, I actually found that I enjoyed all of these different characters that I made up, and generally none of them looked like me. And I found that with on-camera acting, you're sort of locked into, this is who you get to play.
Right.
And
I never thought of it that way before.
Yeah, so with voiceover, I suddenly had this whole world opened up to me of creativity and things that I could do that wasn't necessarily available to me for on camera. And so voiceover was just so much more creatively fulfilling to me.
Mm-hmm. That's
And
so
so
funny because I would say that's one of my favorite things about writing too, is you get
yeah,
to put on these other characters and be them. And like you said, they're characters that I could never be. I mean, my first book was about like a middle-aged man. Like I could never be a middle-aged man no matter, well, I mean, okay, I shouldn't say never, but you know what I mean? Like that's not an experience that I have. In this book, I got to be a 6-year-old girl. And you're not just the narrator, you get to be every character when you're writing a book because, you know, you're even the antagonist, even like every single character's lines are coming from you. So you get to be them all, which is something that you don't really get to experience in any other type of, I don't even think in other types of art do you really get to do that.
yeah, I found it to just be so freeing, honestly, creatively,
Yeah,
because especially in the audiobook realm, being able to play all of the characters in
right.
the book really has stretched my brain in a really fantastic and interesting way.
Yeah, cool. So how do you prepare to do an audiobook? If you're matched up with a novel, what's your first step?
The very first step when I'm asked to do a novel is I read the synopsis.
Right.
And find out if it really does seem like something that I'm right for. And then I read the book. So we read the book.
Good. I wouldn't want it to be your first reading that you're recording necessarily.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I prep it, you know, I may not necessarily read it fully as if I were pleasure reading the book.
Right.
But I'm going to go through and find all of my characters. I'm going to get the idea of the overarching plot of everything. What I did when I first started out is I would sort of cast the book, you know, with various actors that I might think of, and that would help me sort of envision the characters. I'm at the point now where I don't really do that anymore, because a lot of times, especially when you get something that's beautifully written, the characters just jump off the page and you see them for who they are. So they sort of just create themselves that way.
But that's a common question I get asked is like, oh, who would you want to play these characters in a movie? And I'm always like, I don't know. I don't know any 6-year-old actors. Sorry. So I'm sure there's some great ones.
Right.
Like,
Well,
I don't know who would play Uncle Donnie. Some Brad Pitt. I don't know. I got nothing.
I think Brad Pitt would be great as Uncle Donnie. I always imagined Aoife as a, you know, early career Dakota Fanning.
Okay.
Is who I always thought. Because I always felt like Dakota Fanning had this intelligence beyond her years, especially child actor, even now, obviously. But you know, so if I had to, I would have thought that maybe. But for the most part, Aoife especially just sort of was like, she's Aoife. She's a slightly precocious 6-year-old who truthfully has more depth to her than anybody chooses to see because she's 6. And that's something that I've found with a lot of books I've done. I tend to do a lot of middle grade and young adult books because I find that I can tap into that.
Yeah.
You know, the 3-dimensionality of a young person. And so with Aoife especially, I just sort of thought about myself when I was 6 and how I had thoughts and ideas, and they may not have been as articulate as they are now, but I still thought they were the most important thing at the time.
Right.
So
yeah. People ask me that, oh, how did you write a 6-year-old? You don't even have any kids, which is true. I don't have any kids. And I was like, I actually think having kids would make it worse because adults project onto kids, you know, especially your own kids. Those are your like hopes and dreams, and you're thinking about what you want for them and how you don't want them to fail and whatever else. But I was trying to remember being 6. I was not trying to think about how an adult sees a 6-year-old. I was trying to remember what it felt like, you know. And I think Aoife's probably a little older than 6 in some ways. I mean, 6-year-olds don't write actual novels, so it is just a literary conceit. I appreciate that, but like, I really tried to approach it from that perspective of trying to remember the things that bothered you and that childhood is not very easy. I think adults think of it as a very carefree time, but when you're actually 6, you don't feel carefree. Like, you know, there's rules and you're not understanding them and you're behind the curve and you want things, you can't necessarily get them. You're dependent on other people to give you things. You're frustrated. There are things I wouldn't want to do now that I had to do when I was 6, you know, and you just have to suck it up. It's a challenge. So back to my questions before we let anyone else jump in. What does the process of recording the audiobook actually look like? I see that you're in a sound studio there. Is this where you record that?
This is my booth. So even before the pandemic, I had this. So I was set up nicely for the pandemic.
Yeah, you're set. Your career is skyrocketing.
Yes.
More people probably listen to audiobooks than in any other time in recent history right now.
Yes, and I'm very appreciative of that. But yeah, so basically what it consists of is sort of what you see. I've got my iPad, and so PDFs of manuscripts are very appreciated.
Right.
Then you don't hear any page turning or anything like that. It's just sort of a swipe up on my iPad. And generally what happens, I would say, with 85% of the books that I do, I am the engineer and the director.
Wow.
So I am recording myself here at home, and then those files get sent off to the publisher, and they have an engineer then take those files and do the editing and the mastering process. Inevitably, there were a few times there where I flubbed. So inevitably, there's a person also on the editing side who's known as a proofer, and they listen to the book and follow along in the manuscript. That way we're word perfect and we don't miss any of your wonderful writing.
You can change a couple, I bet. That would be doing me a favor.
When it comes to the dialogue, sometimes, we'll maybe add a gonna instead of going,
Right.
something like that. But as far as the narration is concerned, the publishers want you to keep it as word perfect as possible. So we go for that. And so the proofer's job is to catch any mistakes. They send me back what my mistakes are. I re-record them. They get sent back to the engineer, who puts those corrections into the final product, and that gets sent to the publisher, who then sends it to the world.
Cool.
Yeah.
So when you make do you try to read it like a certain amount of time and then stop and correct any little flubs that happened? Or do you try to go straight through, like you read the whole, how much do you do in a day?
I definitely, each time a flub happens, I do what's called punch and roll recording. So in my recording software, if you make a mistake, I'm able to stop the recording, move my cursor to right before that mistake happened, press the button again. It will give me a little lead in so I can hear what I just recorded that was correct. And then right after that, I start recording again. So it just comes in nice and smooth. So generally, there's probably even more mistakes than the proofer will find throughout the recording, but I catch a fair amount of them beforehand.
Yeah.
Or, say I'm hungry and my stomach grumbles or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go in and just re-record. And what that does is it records over that mistake. And then at the end of that chapter, I create, I consolidate all of the re-records together, and it creates one file. So that's how I do it per day. I usually have a goal. I see how many pages a whole book is, and I see how much time I've been allotted that the publisher and I have agreed on. And I go, okay, I have 6 days. How many pages do I need to record in a day?
Really? It's like 6 days short? I thought you'd read like a chapter a day or something. I don't know what I thought. I'm fascinated. Who knows if the audience is fascinated, but I'm fascinated.
No, I generally record probably 2 finished hours a day. Maybe.
Wow. Okay.
So that usually takes me about 2.5 to 3 hours to do in a day, but that's throughout the day. So I do take breaks. I don't do it all in one sitting.
Get some water. Yeah.
Yeah. Get some water, stretch my legs, look outside, do all that. But, I've had some days where I go, oh, this is due. I got to get through this, and I might do a little bit more. I've had other days where I go, I'm really tired. I can't do any more today. And so then I do it the next day. It's sort of one of the blessings of having the autonomy of doing it from home and sort of being the person in charge, is that if I can listen to, it is a very physically taxing endeavor. So I
Yeah.
can listen to my body, and if my body is saying we're done, we're not doing any more today, then we don't do any more.
That's
Yeah. Because I don't want the product, I don't want the final performance to suffer. You know,
right.
the
Well,
whole
and I could tell watching you how much energy you were putting into every line and stuff. You're not just, reading it from the top, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of, even in life, I tend to contort my face quite a bit while I talk. So certainly when I'm doing different characters, that happens, and I talk with my hands a lot, and all this stuff. And also, in order to keep it as quiet as possible, there's no air conditioning inside the booth, so it can get a little warm.
Oh yeah.
You want to step out. But the whole point is that I want to be able to take the story that you've created and just create a 3-dimensional version of it to materialize in the listener's imagination. And so I need to be aware of what's going on around me so that I can do that to the best of my ability.
Cool. Have you ever had to read something that made you uncomfortable, or a scene that's really awkward or anything like that? And how do you handle that?
Yes.
I mean, not in this book because everything is charming. Readers are going to love it. But like in other books or other projects, because I know you do more than just audiobooks. You also do other dubs and other voice recording.
Yeah, I do live action dubbing. I do what's called ADR, where we do the voiceover for the background and all, the extra stuff for film and television. I do commercials, video games. I've done a couple things that I may have found uncomfortable with audiobooks. Probably the most uncomfortable thing was my first dubbing job.
Okay.
I was originally cast as a 11-year-old boy, which was
So this is a whole career for you, just child acting.
No, I do. Children's voices are actually something I get cast for very often.
Okay, well, it makes sense. I mean,
which is totally fine with me. I enjoy it very much.
Yeah.
And so doing that voice was totally fine. But when I arrived at the studio, they said, we also want you to do another character who's a 30-year-old female. And I thought, great, I am a 30-year-old female. Why not? And the very first scene was a love scene. And I never met these people before, and I had never done this job before, and I just sort of went, you're a professional, do your
right.
job. So that's how I get through it whenever I encounter anything. If it's something that really makes me uncomfortable, that's part of the prep that I do when I get asked to do a book, is that I take a look at if there's anything in it that really makes me uncomfortable, that I don't feel like I can condone for some reason or another, or that I don't want to be associated with.
Right.
Then I try to do my due diligence to see that and sort of head that off at the pass, and say thank you so much for considering me, but I'm gonna have to pass. Generally though, like with the dubbing job, to me, I was like, I'm not the actual actor on screen, and they have to do it in front of a whole bunch of people. I just have to do the voiceover. So it could be way worse.
That's true. Fascinating.
Yeah, I just sort of put on this is your job, and it's not like somebody asked me to go live in a ditch or something. I don't know.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, John, I assume you're still there. Hi. Oh, there you are. Hello. Here's your face. We promised we would give people the chance to ask their own questions, and if they don't ask enough questions, I will just keep talking forever. I want to pause before I say that, though, because I always forget. I do have 2 giveaways for anybody who's still on the webinar at the end of the time. I have a copy of the audiobook recorded by the fabulous Jessie, and I also have one of Eva's CDs, and I will send that to anybody who wins the giveaway. So if you want to be entered in the giveaway, all you have to do is stay on until the end of the Q&A, and I will pick names from whoever is still there. Please have a US address. If you do not have a US address where you can get this item, then perhaps end at the end of the Q&A, because I cannot mail it to you in Canada. I'm sorry. Okay, John.
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions that I will ask now. Some of the questions were already asked or answered in the conversation, which is great. First, for Jessie, more about the process. Do you mark up the text with notes to yourself to decide how to read certain lines or certain characters?
When I first started doing audiobooks, I did. When I first started, I wrote tons of notes. I broke it down beat by beat like I would a script. I highlighted each and every character, different color highlights for different characters. I would put notes to remind myself who was speaking. I've now gotten to the point where I've done it enough that I don't actually need to do that at all anymore. I have an Excel spreadsheet when I'm recording that has all of the characters and all of my notes about the characters in that spreadsheet already. And so if for some reason a character pops up and I go, wait, did they have an accent? I can't remember. Because there are times where you have a character who's been a character from the beginning, and then you find out on page 475 that they're Irish, or have some sort of accent, and you go, but I made them Southern. So you always want to make sure that you catch that, because that can be very jarring. But yeah, I would say from in the beginning that was very helpful for me, and I enjoyed that. But now I don't actually really have the time to do it anymore. And I've gotten to a point where I have an understanding of the structure of a manuscript generally, where I don't generally need to do it anymore.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Question for Eliza. Since your hardcover was released last year, what have been your favorite and most surprising reactions to the book?
Well, I guess my favorite reactions, people send really nice messages about like something that they were going through in their lives, like a hard time that they were experiencing. And they say, I got your book from the library, and then I went home and was fighting with my parents or whatever. And I, shut myself in a room with this book, and it like made me feel better, which is, that's like the perfect thing to hear. I think this is a good book for the pandemic because it has nothing to do with pandemics or illnesses, and it's emotional but not stressful in a murdery way. And several people have sent me that message that like for a couple hours they got to be 6 years old again and forget all of the stuff going on in their lives. And you can imagine, out of all of the public, people have awful things going on all the time. They'll say, I read the book in the hospital while my father was dying or whatever. So I love to hear that. I think that's the best you can hope for as a writer, is that somebody gets to escape into this world that you made up. I will say this event has been really fun because I got to have these cool people, and I've been waiting a long time to get Aoife on stage and to get Jesse on stage, and then to have them together, to have them both agree to do it, was pretty amazing. So this is a highlight.
To that point, there's someone who wants to know what inspired you to write the book, and how did the story start for you?
I think I was thinking about children, and I had a short story that came before this book that was from the perspective of a younger child. Harrison was like 4 or something in that story, and it was first person as well. I didn't know that had been already done as a novel in the book room, but whatever. To me, it was fresh, and I was exploring things that children can't understand, things that a 4-year-old cannot comprehend. And so that was the point of the short story. And when I finished it, I was like, can I keep going with this idea? Could I do a whole book this way? And it was really a challenge. I honestly didn't think I could. I didn't think a first person 6-year-old protagonist would. I thought I was at least going to have to cut to a different point of view or something. And there are letters in the book, so at least you get a little bit of a break. But that idea about children encountering things that children do not have the capacity, literally the capacity to understand, like mental illness. Aoife doesn't have an understanding of brain chemistry, or how it's possible to have visions and be reliable in some ways and unreliable in others. Like, she just can't comprehend that. And other things too, like why her uncle isn't comfortable in church when church is such a big part of her life. Like, she can't understand the connection between the adults in her life, some of their past stories and why they act the way they do. She literally has no ability to understand that. And so the way that children navigate that is interesting to me. I think sometimes they make up their own magical solutions. Other times they just keep pushing at it and testing it and trying to figure out what it is. I think adults think that if we lie to children or mislead them or don't talk about something, that they won't think about it and that they'll move on. But I think children are much smarter than that. and they will come up with their own reason why you don't like to talk about this issue or what they think happened in this situation. Like, they're gonna turn it over in their little tiny brains. So that's what I was thinking about as I wrote the book, and that was the inspiration of the narrator being so young. So I actually aged her up. People are like, how did you write such a young protagonist? I'm like, this is my second shot. She's older. She started out 4. But like I said, that had actually already been done. So good job me not killing myself trying to do that.
And then I think we have time for one more question, which is sort of a classic, great last question to ask on, which is, do you have any other books in the works? What's next?
I do have another book. It is in contract confusion right now. So it is finished. It, I believe, has been sold, although we have not signed all the paperwork. So in my newsletter, I told people that it was happening and a little bit about it. And then later realized I probably shouldn't have ought to done that because we haven't checked every box yet. But it's the story of a woman who is a historian and a botanist, and there's a major hurricane coming towards the house that she has restored, and she's not leaving. So it's about sort of somebody going to extremis for history and why someone would do that. It was inspired by the Hemingway house in Key West when they didn't evacuate when Hurricane Irma was coming. And I was obsessed with that story. I was like, who would stay in this house? You know, who would decide to stay? At that point, Irma was this massive, you know, giant storm. The Key West was like this big, the storm was this big, and it was closing in. And those people would not leave. And I wanted to tell that story. So we'll see if that ever makes it to the shelves of Literati or not. You know, publishing, it's a crazy business.
Well, hopefully we can have you in the store as well when it's actually out too.
Yeah,
so.
Maybe Jesse can read it. I hope so.
I would love to. That sounds really interesting, actually.
It was a really cool story to write. And I'm kind of annoyed because everybody retroactively is going to be like, oh, I get it. It's a quarantine book because she's like trapped in this house and everything outside the house is kind of awful and she's in the house. I'm like, no, damn it. I wrote the draft before this happened. This is not a quarantine book.
With everything going on, we can all twist anything to be a quarantine story because that's where true. All of our brains are now. So
that's where we're at. Yes, that's very true.
All right, shall we do a giveaway?
Yes. Okay. So I have 2 items. There will be 2 winners. If you are not in the US, you might just want to leave the webinar now. All right. So I will choose. We've got some fake names. Thanks, guys. I know who you are. I will choose Kimberly Austin. You will have a copy of All That's Bright and Gone, the audiobook. And let's say Gwen Alexander, you will win a copy of Aoife's CD, and I will send them to you. So if you could both please send me an email to eliza.nellums@gmail.com. I will get your addresses and put these in the mail for you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you both for being here this evening. Thanks to Eliza Nellums and to Jesse Vilinksy, and congrats on the paperback release, of All That's Bright and Gone. And if you want to hear Jesse read it in its entirety and still support Literati Bookstore, there is a wonderful audiobook service called Libro.fm, and you can make audiobook purchases that support independent bookstores like ours. So maybe if you've got another bookstore that you want to support as well by buying that audiobook, please do, although we're happy for your support as well. And as I mentioned, you can purchase the book at the link I've put in the chat and also in the description below on YouTube from Literati Bookstore. Eliza and Jesse, thank you so much for being here and joining us at Home with Literati.
And we hope to have you. Scott.
Yes,
the real Aoife Scott.
In Ireland, and who's been to Ann Arbor, so we hope to maybe we can do a big reunion.
Yeah, you have to host her now.
And in the spring or in the summer. Well, we'd love to. Take care, both of you, and to all of our attendees, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you
at
the next event.
Bye.
Good night, all.
Bye.